Okay, friends, welcome to our third session in the measurement and evaluation little mini series that we're doing here with Perception Funding. Last time we kind of left off sharing a little bit about why organizations should continue on past the measurement phase on into the evaluation phase, because evaluation allows us to be able to really determine whether the programs that we have enacted are having the kind of effect and impact that we'd hope for, and whether we are allocating resources in the best way possible to achieve our mission's goals, amongst another of other things. Jonathan, I think it was you, it might have been someone else, brought up the idea of case studies. It might have been Joe, and how impactful it is when we're sharing information to our constituents, whether that's in a newsletter or at a fundraiser event or even on social media, that we include personal stories and testimonies as a part of that, because that really does touch people's hearts in a unique way and can sway individuals to get involved with what we're doing that may not have really connected the dots before. And I think that's a great point. As we're talking about different forms of data, we have quantitative data, which is what we talked about at the beginning of the series with the measurement component of what we're doing, which is just really counting our inputs and our outputs. And then we have more qualitative data that's based on gathering data in other ways. And it's kind of more research focused, not to intimidate anyone. It doesn't have to be real hefty. And one component of gathering qualitative data and information that we can then share is through case studies or through gathering stories, personal testimonies and experiences from those beneficiaries that are a part of our programs that we've had a chance to impact or to touch their lives in a certain way. And so let's just start by examining case studies here. Talk to me, you all. I know we started talking about this last time, but from your experience, what has been the benefit of sharing those kind of personal impact stories with people as a part of your ministry?
Well, I think part of it that you have listed on here, it puts relationship into it. It puts actual people into it. It puts, you know, puts flesh and blood, to it versus a thing that we're doing. The data collected. What you said here on this deal is like communicates. One communicates to the mind, one communicates to the heart, right? So I think that's goes straight to the heart on the case, the study, the testimonies, the stories that are part of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love what you said there about how that puts flesh and blood around it.
Mm-hmm.
Helps us to see how helps us personally, and then also, our stakeholders to see how the work that we're doing is not just about impacting numbers or a problem. It's actually about a person, and that's why we do what we do. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's just similar to what Joe said. It just makes it real for people. We're not just being in terms of this is our mission, but it shows what we're doing with our mission.
Yeah.
This is the impact, how we're getting things done.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it can also help to bridge some of those even cultural barriers when, we talk about how sharing, like for an example, with the Nets for All that we've been following along, if we're reaching a US funding base, we don't have malaria in this country. So it might be hard to connect to that idea of why providing mosquito nets is even important. Why does that even matter? But then when we share the story of a family that we know that used to be sick with the malaria all the time, and how it was impacting them, how it's keeping them from working, how it's keeping their kids home from school, how maybe they even lost a child as a result of that disease. And then we say, you can be a part of preventing that, not only for this family and change their lives for good, but all these other families in their community who are going through the same thing. So it helps to bridge that gap, I think, even in understanding where we don't have a similar experience and we need a way to connect. So case studies are awesome. You should do them. Everyone should do case studies and tell stories and gather qualitative data and ask people for for quotes about how our program impacted them. And that should be a part of our story, or sorry, of our strategy. As we monitor our programs, it should be something we're regularly setting out to do, is to gather those stories and those case studies. And we should not only rely on those case studies. Why might we not want to only use case studies as a method of demonstrating the impact of our programs?
Well, I think a little bit just like communicating with people. A case study is one piece of how you would communicate what's going on. So, like I think about my ministry, or I think about in church, when you're communicating what's going on, you do it by way of email, you do it by way of an e-news, you do it by way of somebody physically standing up, speaking it. There's multiple ways that the message is brought in different formats that I think would add to the way that your message is communicated to those you're trying to communicate for whatever reason. So it's just a piece of the puzzle to me.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a component of how we communicate, but it doesn't necessarily take the place of other methods that we might use to communicate. Along with that, I'm just going to flip to the next slide here, where I have kind of a list of reasons why relying on only case studies can be problematic if we're trying to use them to demonstrate impact. It's a great way to communicate that we're having an impact, and that we're having an impact on a real person or a real family. But it doesn't actually allow us to know if we're having a widespread impact, if we're really only looking at one or two cases here and there. And so if we rely only on case studies as our method for evaluating whether the work we're doing is achieving our goals over the course of a whole area, region, or community, then this is why it can be problematic. Because case studies alone, I use the word cherry picking here, they're essentially kind of choosing sometimes, that one or two people that we know had a really great experience with our program. They really connected well. They experienced a big transformation as a result of what we're doing, and we tell their story. Of course, it's advantageous to do that. We want to do that. We want to be encouraged by those stories. We want our donors to know that they're investing in something that is producing change. But if we're only relying on that, then that really doesn't give a complete picture of the entire impact of our program across the whole. So because case studies are not random, typically, they can be considered biased, especially if we're using them in some sort of grant reporting mechanism, right? Like grants will appreciate a case study if we're telling them how we use their funding and what it was used to accomplish, but they're going to typically dig deeper and say, what other methods are you using to show that this is really having a true impact? Case studies do not draw from a large enough sample pool to demonstrate statistical effectiveness of our resource allocation or our programs, nor does it always show us the areas for improvement, right? Like if we're only kind of focusing on the good stories or the good encounters that people have with us, we might not always hear the constructive feedback that we need to improve our programs. Case studies can be used, as I just said, in a funding application, but they're not typically accepted as the sole basis for grant applications or funding. And then it doesn't allow us to know personally if what we're doing is really working, right? And we really want to be able to gauge that.
Yeah.
So then we move into the evaluation side with our key tool that we use to conduct evaluation, which is surveys. And in order to have an effective survey tool, we start with our first survey that we try to deliver to constituents towards the beginning of our program, maybe even before they've even begun whatever program we're offering. So Jeremiah, if you're teaching, a course on cultural intelligence, you would give the survey at the beginning of your course to find out how people are coming into the course, what they know, what they don't know. Joe, same for you with walking the walls. Jonathan, you could do the same thing for new clients coming into Perception Funding, where, how are you coming in? What are your current gaps? Where are your current challenges? And so we ask a set of questions that we design around the indicators that we said we wanted to measure last time, right? Where are the areas that we want to see impact, that we want to see improvement or growth? And those areas are, or how we're going to kind of try to pinpoint whether as a result of our programs and our efforts, we see any positive change or growth. And so we start by designing a baseline survey is what it's called, that we ask at the beginning, or as close to the beginning as we can get with people who are going through our programs. And then we give the same or very similar, with just a few tweaks to it, the same survey to those same constituents, usually within 6 to 12 months of having completed our program. And depending on what the survey, depending on what the program is designed to accomplish, you might be able to give that survey really close to the end of your program. If the main thing you do is designed to produce change as a result of the service or program you're doing, like cultural intelligence, if your main goal through that, Jeremiah, is to see that people grow a certain degree in their ability to understand the differences between cultures and how we fit into that story, then you might be able to give the survey right at the end of that program. But if instead you wanted to see how that program changes their approach to ministry and relationships, that's going to be something you're going to have to wait a few months out to see, whether they've been able to adopt some of those things they learned and put them into practice, and then speak about how it has impacted and changed their ministry. Then after we've done our surveys, we want to report accurately on how many of our original group we were able to follow up with. So if I had 100 people go through business training, then I'm going to want to follow up with as many of them as I can track down afterwards. And that's where that first baseline survey is so handy, because I always ask for people's best, contact number and email and WhatsApp on there, so that I can really try to follow up with them well within a certain amount of time. And then you state that at the top of your survey findings, out of 100 participants, I tracked down 50 and I surveyed them with a follow-up survey. And these are the results that I obtained. And that's just called methodology. You're just being upfront about your methodology, because it really, especially to a funding partner that knows something about this, if you gave a class to 100 people and you only surveyed 5 of them afterwards, and you start saying, like 100% of people grew exponentially as a result of what I taught them, well, that really changes the flavor if we were only able to interview 5 out of 100. So it's important to explain our methodology when we talk about how many people we were able to survey and what kind of results we received back from those surveys. Okay, 2 types.
So can I ask a question back there on that slide? You had the rule of 100.
My monologue, Joe. Thank you.
Sorry. The rule of 100, is that basically what you would try to do, is look at, you base that on the best number you can reach of 100, just so it's
yeah. So
great
question. Thanks, Joe, for bringing me back to that, because I did sort of skip over that. There's all kinds of data out there, and I'm still learning in this area myself. But my understanding from these couple of sites here that are on the side that I've looked into is that the smaller your baseline group, the more of them that you need to be able to interview in order to capture a true statistic and reduce that margin for error. Now, if you have a group of, 1,000 people, you could probably get away with interviewing 100 of those and still have a pretty good representative sample of what the entire group's experience looked like. So yeah, I would encourage you, I have these slides up in an e-course through Perception Funding. And if you want to look at these sites a little bit more in depth and do a little bit more research, you can do that to try to figure out what works. But yeah, if you're working with less than 100 people, you want to try to survey all of them if you can. Yeah. Good question, Joe. Thanks. Anything else before I keep going? Okay, so the 2 types of surveys that I kind of lean on, one is just an overall program satisfaction or program effectiveness survey. So for me, after I do an online course, I always send out as part of the final quiz an assessment survey for people to let me know how it went for them and where I can improve. I think, Joe, you could do that easily if you don't already with Walking the Walls. You probably already do. But it's just a way to gather, how are we doing? What do people want? What did they like? What worked? What didn't? How can we do better next time? And it also gives you some marketing material. If they liked certain things and you can capture that, then you can put that out there when you're advertising your next event or your next program. And the next type is a program evaluation itself. And this is really, this is geared towards your mission. So just evaluating whether what you're doing as a whole is having the impact that you want. And that measures organizational impact in key areas. Okay, so kind of going back to some of what we've discussed, you want to start with the outcomes or those, those key indicators that you're hoping to achieve through your organization or through just a certain program within your organization. Doesn't have to be the whole thing. And if your organization does many things, I would suggest having individual surveys and evaluation kind of strategies for each program that you have, because it's really hard to capture it all at once. Otherwise, it just gets too lengthy for people. And then you can also use those same indicators when you're developing your theory of change. And that's a whole other conversation we can have sometime. But the first thing you're going to do when you're trying to create this survey for your evaluation use is define the goals of your mission and programs, develop those indicators, and then establish when you're going to be successful at reaching those. So if you've learned about SMART goals in the past, we want to be able to have these be measurable things. So maybe our first impact that we're hoping to see with Net for All program is to decrease malaria by 70% in a certain area. Maybe our next is to reduce infant mortality by 50%. Maybe our third is to increase health and productivity by 25%. So once we know that, now we're going to design our survey questions around that to try to figure out how we can get people to tell us the right information that allows us to know if this is happening. Then we work backwards, to determine how we'll know when those goals have been met and design our questions around that. So, for example, some of those questions we might want to ask around those indicators we just spoke about are, how many days per month are you sick on average, right? This is our baseline survey. This is what we're asking people coming in. They don't have a net yet. How many days are you sick right now? How many days a month are you missing work or school because of this? How many days per month do you tend to miss work because of a dependence illness? How much income do you lose when you miss work? How often are you getting a prescription from the pharmacy in a month? Or you could even say a malarial prescription or a malaria test. How much does this cost your family? Okay, so this isn't exhaustive. This is just to give you an idea of some of the things I would ask if I wanted to determine, if we're having an impact in these areas. So we're asking these up front. Then we're assuming we're going to give out some nets to these families, and we're going to come back after they've had their net, maybe 4 or 5 months, however long we think it would take to really see an impact from this. And we're going to ask these same questions again, with a few probably additions. So when you're designing survey questions, I think this kind of goes without saying, but just a tip is to try your hardest to ask objective questions for the most part, rather than subjective questions. Looking for things that give you numerical data, yes or no, multiple choice, check all that apply or are on like a linear scale. Like how much out of 1 to 10 do you experience this? Short answer or paragraphs are okay, maybe 1, maybe 2, and that helps you capture those sound bites for your testimonies, But if you base the majority of your questions on short answer or paragraph, it's really hard to collect and analyze your data. You're going to spend a lot of time digging through to find commonalities. Whereas, all these yes, no check boxes, they populate into a spreadsheet really nicely and take a lot of work out of it for you. So here I have some sample surveys and what my surveys tend to look like. This can be put in a Google form if you have people that have access to phones and data plans. If I'm working cross-culturally, I will just say I do highly encourage personal interview, and this is a global standard. Personal interview, rather than setting a participant down with a piece of paper and letting them fill out the survey on their own. You get much better data if you do an interview style with an interviewer that's been trained by you on the effectiveness of good survey delivery. Because otherwise, a lot of times you risk people not really understanding what the question's actually answering. Things get lost in translation, and you just might not get back real accurate information. So you can otherwise, if it's same culture, you can, I think oftentimes just present people with a Google form or, a piece of paper to fill out at your event or something. So this doesn't include like demographics for, contact information that I would clearly put in there. But yes, some of the things I would ask if this was my Net for All survey are people's name, their age, what part of town they live in, how long they've been there, how many household members do they have, how many are currently sleeping beneath a net. If they're not, why don't they? And then how often do they fall sick? How many times is someone in their household diagnosed per year with malaria? What do you think contributes the most to your illnesses? Because that helps us know, are we really meeting their needs with these nets, or is there something else we could be doing? How many days do they miss of work? How much income do they lose? So that just kind of gives you a picture of what a survey can look like and how I structure those. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions around that? Okay. And then 6 to 12 months later, we're going back to these same people that got their nets. And here's what my next survey might look like. I've put the title in the top, and then I went ahead and filled in, how many people I was able to survey, and when I conducted this survey. And so we're going to ask, as you see here, a lot of similar questions, but we tweak them a little bit. Did you or a member of your household receive a mosquito net? Yes or no? How many nets did you receive? Did receiving a net positively affect your situation somehow? Yes, no. In what way did it impact your situation? And then we give them some choices here, and they can self-elect like a certain percentage of how it improved their health or their security or their productivity. These are not firm pieces of data. If we want to know if people's health is improved, we're really going to look down to the question that evaluates how many less times they're going to the doctor or how many less days they're getting sick. This is more of a subjective question that they are self-reporting on, but it's still valuable data. If you received a net from a staff or volunteer, how would you rate the encounter? And then in what ways did it provide these things? Or would you say it provided hope or relief or encouragement or connection? Again, there you're drawing out some more, feeler words for those people that are going to connect on a heart level. Here's my 2 kind of short answers. What was the best part of receiving a net? How often do you need a new net to be supplied? And how could we improve this program? So again, we would ask all the same questions from the first survey, and then we would add on these extra questions to really get a full evaluation of how the program had impacted people. Any thoughts or questions on this part of it?
Questions. I think the thought I have is it's really good that there's obviously that's why you're teaching us this. There's the yes and no answers. There's I can put a percentage to something answers, and a couple just give me a information, like fill out, give me a soundbite. So I think it's really great that as I just did a survey today about my experience with Southwest Airlines, and it was the most boring survey I have ever taken. I didn't even mean to do it. And then once I'm in, it's like, surely this won't be too long, but it was exact same. Every question was almost like identical question. And it was totally boring.
Yeah, I think making surveys fun is an art, and it can really help improve the process.
At least as fun as you can. A survey is a survey, but you make it at least enjoyable a little bit along the way.
Sure. Yeah.
I've only. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan. I've only used the survey for perception funding to figure out um, in our we've added a 5-question survey when a missionary wants to work with us, so they want to be a missionary of ours. And so we did it short because I feel like that's the best way to get it filled out is if it's just a few questions. But also if they're really wanting to work with us, they're going to fill it out. And so I guess this my thought is, yeah, if there's not an incentive for them to do it, how do you get people to do it, especially if it's long?
That's a
Just kind of
super great
something I'm
question.
wrestling with sitting here. Because
Yeah.
yeah, for us with ministry partners, with current ministry partners, we can get them to do it because there's the financial tie of we have your money. But but yeah, with other organizations, how do you get people to do it? And we're like, I've seen a business they have take our survey and you click on it, and I've had a friend whose business it was a one question survey. And it's like, yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you get them to take it.
Yeah. I think it depends on the type of survey. I think that's a great question. And you're right, Jonathan, shorter the better. I am notorious for super long surveys, and it's a problem because I just love data and I love getting as much of it as I can. I think on one hand, if you're doing it digitally, you're doing it to clients or people in the United States. They really are going to be honored by a shorter survey. I think there are different ways to incentivize it. You know, if it's an existing client and you're saying, hey, we really are doing this because we care about you and we want to know how we can best serve you. Would you please take 5 minutes to answer the survey so we can improve how we care for you? I think that would work in certain environments. I think in other capacities, you know, you can always incentivize with a freebie, like take our survey and you're going to get this, or take our survey and you're going to get entered into a raffle for something awesome. Those are some ways people do it here. When I am overseas doing overseas work, I build it into my programming. So if I do a business training, we purposefully cut off the last day early for the sake of surveys. I bring in food, I bring in drink. People are eating, they're drinking, and then my team is pulling people one by one out the door, take a 30-minute survey, then go back to the party and send in the next person. And we just build in the time for it because it is so important. And then as far as the follow-up surveys go, I pay for them as an organization, which there is, I don't pay the person who's taking the survey typically. I pay the survey administrator, and I pay them a set price for a completely filled out survey that's translated for me. And then they just go to people's homes. And I think most people are just happy to have the connection at that point.
Cool.
Yeah. Jeremiah?
I want you to do my whole survey for me. But just asking real quick, you know, having gone through the CQ stuff with me there, yeah, like how deep would you go? Because I'm in my mind, I'm like, man, I could go like through each cultural value and ask them, but then that's kind of pulling away from the relational dynamic of talking about them with my clients. Yeah, how deep would you suggest for the pre-survey? Should I go on that front? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think you could just list each cultural value and say, and like a quick 1-line description for that, and then just ask, rate your understanding of of this cultural value coming in, and just get an idea. And I think that also the academic world has shown that there's really a benefit to the pre-survey when someone's going into a learning opportunity. When you ask them what they want to learn about, or how much they know about something, or how little they know about something going in, they're more vested in what they're going to be taking away from the time with you. So I think it would even benefit what you do on that side too.
Kind of like what Jonathan was talking about, leaving them hungry, you know, trying to whet their appetite, help them realize their need for that. That's great.
Yeah, good question.
Awesome.
But Jeremiah, I'm happy to work with you and anyone else who's, watching this. I love I love survey design. I love data collection. It's a
Thank you.
really weird thing about me. So just let me know if I can help in that area. Okay, so then once we get back our data after our follow-up surveys that we're doing, we use that data to then pull numbers out in such a way that they tell a story. And hopefully it's a good story, but also, there's a lot of indicators that are like, whoa, well, that's not working. We need to rethink that, and that's very helpful. So yeah, we might say 25% reported this, 50% reported that, 75% reported this based on our answers. So we're giving people some quantifiable data that shows change. It doesn't just measure inputs and outputs like our measurement tactics do, but it actually shows measurable change through a percentage of people and how they've been impacted. And then, you can slip in some of those quotes that you're going to pull from those little 1 to 2 questions that we ask that are short answer. I don't know that we have time for this at this point, but let's just say now we have the opportunity to really write some compelling posts for people because we've combined our measurement activities with our evaluation activities, and we really can give people information that does broach their head and their heart at the same time. So I'll let you guys read through those, on the e-course if you'd like to see them more closely, some examples of posts that we could give, but I won't go through them today. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts as we leave here today about this topic? And again, I just want to encourage you to reach out to me or anyone who does come across this content and let me know if I can help you with setting up a good system for measuring and evaluating the important work that you do.
No questions. I think it's good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I really appreciate I tend to be the one-on-one conversation kind of guy. And so this is really helpful to see I always kind of poo-pooed numbers. So this is really helpful. This is actually can play into that on both sides. So really helpful.
Good. Awesome.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you all. Go ahead and